Last week, Honda announced a slightly more modern, sporty, sort of scrambler-looking version of their CB350 for the Indian market called the CB350RS. And I had to cover this one because not only is it a great-looking little bike, but over 10% of my audience is in India. In fact, it's my second biggest audience. So for you guys, in today's video, we'll go over the specs of this new machine from Honda and find out what sets it apart from the CB350 Highness. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here on YouTube, then please do remember to hit subscribe. Now clearly it's a very similar bike to the CB350. Both use a 348cc single-cylinder air-cooled engine that's capable of a peak of 21 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 30 Nm of peak torque at 3,000 RPM. Clutch action should be nice and light with a slip assist design as well as smoothing out aggressive downshifts, and there's also a 5-speed gearbox. The engine is suspended low in a duplex cradle steel frame, which Honda says helps to keep the center of gravity low for easy-going handling. And in terms of dimensions, the RS gets the same 800mm seat height as the regular CB350, although curb weight is a couple of kilograms down at 179, whilst the all-important ground clearance in the Indian market has gone up from 166 to 168mm. Tank capacity remains at 15 litres though, which should be plenty with a fairly economical little engine like this. In terms of suspension, the RS gets the same telescopic fork up front and the twin shocks at the rear. Braking comes in the form of a single 310mm disc at the front and a 240mm disc at the rear with dual-channel ABS on hand for added safety. Both bikes get Honda's selectable torque control, which is their name for switchable traction control. Whether or not it's truly necessary on a 21 horsepower bike though is perhaps questionable, but in less than ideal riding conditions or on loose surfaces, some riders might prefer to have it, and for those that don't, you can always switch it off. Now, one feature missing from the RS though is Honda's smartphone voice control feature, which allows you to pair a phone and headset with the dash to control navigation, music, phone calls and messages using both voice commands and the controls on the switchgear. This is present on the DLX Pro version of the regular CB350, and it's certainly a tempting feature if you're using navigation frequently or like to take calls when you ride. And the thing is, the RS is actually more expensive than that version. The CB350 starts at 1.85 lakh, while the DLX Pro version with the smartphone control and fancier paint is 1.9. The RS comes in at 1.96, so what do you get for that extra cash? Really, it's a styling job. You can see hints of their bigger bikes in this RS design, with a new headlight, more modern looking side panels, mudguards and grab rails, and what they call eye-shaped indicators as opposed to the circular versions on the CB350. They've certainly tried to give it a bit of a scrambler look too, with a tuck and roll style seat, tyres with a more off-road looking tread pattern, and a revised exhaust with a heat shield that's super common on that style of bike. There's also a sump guard which might add a bit of protection to the underside of the engine, and fork boots contribute to the styling whilst also potentially keeping a bit of dirt away from the innards. Both bikes get the same 19-inch front wheel, but the RS has a 17-incher on the rear as opposed to the 18 on the CB350, and it's wider too at 150mm rather than 130. That'll give it a slightly more substantial, sportier look from the rear, but again at 21 horsepower, the extra grip is basically academic. And so that's essentially the toss-up. Do you go for the more modern, aggressive-looking RS version and stomach the extra cost? Or do you save some cash with the traditional looks of the CB350 DLX or DLX Pro and get the smartphone connectivity on the Pro? As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure there are a few of you who would go for neither and just buy an Enfield Meteor 350 instead, so I'd love to hear from you too. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.